talk about three political soteriologies in nowadays and the future of liberal democracy. My starting point is that modern politics can be, a large part of modern politics can be understood in the terms of the immanentization of hope and faith. Hope and faith in pre-modern times was tied with a transcendent horizon, has entered history, and as a consequence, politics received the task of making a better present and a better future. Pre-modern politics was not so much a question of taking care of the citizens, of the people, of curating the present and ensuring a better future, but this is the task of modern politics. In its most radical forms, this task of taking care of the present and the future become an ambitious and potentially dangerous exercise of repairing the human condition and also of correcting the history. And the danger here is that in its most radical forms, the politics that has to remove the evil from the present and to produce a better, brighter future risks of becoming what I will call a political soteriology. Why this is dangerous? Because a political soteriology conflicts directly with the ideal and the mainstream understanding of liberal democracy. So, where do I converge with this research agenda of secularized religion, of sacralization of politics, of political religion, and where I depart? Next slide, please. We all know Raymond Aron talked about the secular religions. Karl Levitt talked about the sacralization of politics through myths, through theological and religious structures. And so, a recent researcher, Emilio Gentile, we all know Carl Schmitt's discussion about political theology. We all know Erich Voegelin's concept of political religions when referring to fascism and Nazism and communism. But this type of agenda risks two things. First of all, it is too broad, and we can very easily put in this, under this very large conceptual umbrella, everything that may look like having a religious structure, even though it is not a direct continuation or an intentional recovery of an intentional recovery of a religious structure. The second risk, and this was a question I wanted to ask Professor Franco and Susanna, is the criticism of Hans Blumenberg. I don't know if I put him here. Blumenberg. Okay. In 1985, maybe, I don't know the year, Blumenberg published a book named The Legitimacy of Modernity. And he said that this whole research agenda of secularized religions is risking to transform modernity from a legitimate political project that, despite all the losses that brought in the human conditions, made some actual improvements and effective and benign changes, and the risks of talking only about like a derivative, like a substitute of a true religion, risks to delegitimize the modernity. So, keeping in mind this criticism brought forth by Blumenberg, but also having in mind the fact that all these authors, of these theorists, actually grasped the way in which old religious structures have persisted in our modern political understanding, language, and representation, I want to put forth another concept. My concept is that of political soteriology. I think this is a middle way, the concept of political soteriology, because it is narrower than that of political religion, and because it is also sufficiently larger to take into account different types of ideologies of political endeavors, irrespective of their genealogy or of their actual political and ideational content. What is the structure of a political soteriology? It has 5 elements. It has it has a fall from paradise, or a fallen, as Heidegger would say, or something that is an original sin. And through this first element of faith, the community is described as a wounded, as a corrupted, as alienated, or as captured or disordered. It has someone who is guilty for that. It has a culprit. It has an agent that bears the guilt of this fall. And the fall is attributed to enemies, to impure groups, or to symbolic representatives of evil. It also has a savior, a salvific agent, a savior that can take the community, can take society from its current fallen state to a brighter future. But this savior needs a sign of atonement from the community. It needs a conversion, of a purification. And as such, or memory, either memory or language or behavior or institutions must be transformed. And finally, the 5th element, a political soteriology promises a final reconciliation, a utopic future where everything is resolved. I have identified, and I want to talk about the 3 main political soteriologies. I don't claim that there are only 3, but I think 3 of them best illustrate this concept of political soteriology. So the 3 main ideologies I want to talk about, and I use the word ideology in its very large meaning, not as a thin concept, but as a large one. Ideology as something that is proposed to as a view on how the state should be managed and society. So, the three main ideologies I want to talk about are populist messianism. The second is emancipatory radicalization or ultra-progressivism. And the third one is a type of post-political technocracy. Because I don't have time, I had three slides with each of them, but I want to bring you to a type of chart, a figure, where I briefly summarized these three forms of political soteriology. So, what is messianic populism? We know from Casmude, Cristobal Rovira, Paul Wasser, from Takis Papas, and from many theorists of populism, that the main stance of populism is this antagonism between the pure and homogeneous people and the corrupted elite. What is the original evil? What is the fallen? What is the fall for messianic populism? It is the betrayal of people. The betrayal of people by the elites. Do we have a savior? Yeah, we have a savior. And that's why I want to talk about messianic populism, not every kind of populism, and not every account of populism falls under this messianic populism. For example, the way Claudio Laclau talks about populism does not necessarily fall under this concept of messianic populism. For the messianic populism, the savior is either the populist leader, the one who has a direct connection with the pure people, thus bypassing all the institutional structures of a complex liberal democracy. The means of purification, the atonement for the populist messianism is the exclusion of the internal enemy, be it the press, be it the elites, be it the politicians, the parliament in some times. And what is the promise? I didn't put every of the five elements. What is the danger of this messianic populism is the delegitimization of the opposition. Why the opposition is necessary? Because it's one of the fundamental elements of democracy. And what I wanted to tell you, I forgot. Before anything, why political soteriology? And I make this necessary parenthesis. Why the concept of political soteriology is dangerous for liberal democracy? Because how I want to define liberal democracy is that it is a political regime that has an essence which consists of limits. The essence of liberal democracy is the limit. It is a regime of limit. It does not promise a pure future. It does not promise total salvation, but it promises something very, very simple. That it can bring together two ideas that 100 years ago were conflicting. The sovereignty of the people, which entails an emphasis on majorities, and the sovereignty of the individual, which actually emphasizes the importance of the individual. So liberal democracy is this, not that paradoxical now, alliance between the importance of the political body, the people, and the importance of the individual. To maintain this alliance, you also need limits. You don't need greater promises of salvation. You only need the separation of powers together with checks and balances. You need not the arbiter. No, you need a state that is run not by the arbitrary will of people, but by the rule of law. You need an extensive set of rights and liberties for individuals, and you need alternations to power. I now close my parenthesis and I turn back to the three political soteriologies. So, in a liberal democracy, criticism is an important factor of maintaining this, the essence of the liberal democracy, which is the limit. The risk of messianic populism is the delegitimation of the opposition and of the idea of criticism. What is the problem with the emancipatory radicalism or the radical emancipatory political soteriology? What is the original evil for them? Even if it is the radical anti-racism like Black Lives Matter movement, even if it is radical feminism or the radical forms of activism for LGBTQ people, the original evil for them is the structural domination. This type of concept somehow asserts that the oppression is structural and it is an a priori. Not every time it is backed by empirical evidence. It is an a priori claim that every society is under oppression by the white people, by the straight people, by men, by male, or by, I don't know, by religion that is majority. What is the savior for radical emancipatory political soteriology is the awakened subject. The subject that knows that the culprit is the man or the heterosexual person or the member of the mainstream cult or religion. What is the atonement for radical emancipatory politics? The means of purification. It is a type of moral or in its most frequent forms of even linguistic reeducation. We all know this program of reinventing or of refashioning the words in order not to be offensive or not to or in order to manage the sensitivities of marginalized groups. In its most radical forms of already these radical types of political soteriology, sometimes there are even practices that are imported from religions. We can remember that during the Black Lives Matter, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, white people were washing the feet of black people because that way they showed their deep regret, their type of metanoia, of expiation, of changing their sinful structure, internal structure. What is the democratic danger? It's not only the delegitimization of opposition, like in the case of populist messianism, but it's the moralization of disagreement. politics in liberal democracy must be a competitive arena in which different types of political programs compete for the votes of common people. But to compete for the votes of common people, you need not to moralize the political agendas. Because the moralization of political agenda leads to a general moralization of disagreement. Nowadays, it becomes increasingly difficult to have disagreement regarding some sensitive issues like race, like the binary, like the nation sometimes, like binary sex even, not only binary gender, binary sex. There is something that I forgot the name of this researcher, but there is a sociological explanation named, an agenda named the falsification of preferences, even in the study of nature, in the scientific realm. There is a tendency for researchers to falsify not only their preference, but to falsify even what means applying some impersonal principles of scientific inquiry. So, coming back, the risk with radical emancipatory political soteriology is the moralization of disagreement. And the last one, because I wanted to give three totally different examples for what means a political soteriology, would be technocracy, but not only technocracy as such, a kind of post-political technocracy that is actually very political. What do I mean by post-political? It is the idealization of technocracy as something that is way better than political disagreement. That technocracy could actually save human race. If we actually this type of technocratic this type of political soteriology has its roots, like all of them, has its roots in enlightenment. Because populism, by stressing the sovereignty of the people, is an idea that comes from enlightenment. The emancipation of people comes from enlightenment, but even technocracy comes from enlightenment. Applying logic, evidence, applying reasoning to solve humanity's problems. So, what is the problem with post-political technocracy? The original evil for them is the social irrationality. The fallen means that there is a fundamental problem with people being irrational. But liberal democracy actually takes into account the fact that we are all irrational. Because that means politics, means the confrontation of different types of irrationalities that actually become rational because we are all competing and arguing and even sometimes rationalizing our irrational impulses. But liberal democracy makes room for our irrational impulses. Technocratic post-political technocracy does not make room for social irrationality. It is an evil. It is something that must be eradicated. Who is the savior, the salvific agent for technocratic political soteriology? It is the expert or the algorithm, AI, nowadays. Or the expert. We also had one who actually now is ad interim prime minister, the one who was seen, although came from a political party, as the expert. We have the cult of the expert. And there is this type of ideology that pretends not to be ideology, to be science, and that pretends to be non-political, but it's actually very political, even though it aims to overcome politics, that the algorithms, the expert, will better take care of humanity. But we all know that the problem here is that not only there is a problem with accountability of the political, of the technocratic leader, but there is also the problem that liberal democracy needs debate, and needs not only a competent debate made by the experts, but also a debate that is purely political, that takes into account all our values, all our different types of preferences. And that is why John Rawls stressed that value pluralism and political pluralism is an important part of liberal democracy. And in a way, this idea resonates with Claude Lefort's idea that in democracy, in liberal democracy, the content of substantive value is an empty place. So democracy has an empty place that can be filled with our actual dynamics of preferences. What is the means of purification for post-political technocratism is behavioral optimization, is the datafication of individuals in its most radical forms. And the democratic danger, as I have already stressed, is this kind of minimization of deliberation. I think I have already talked too much, and I wanted to give a brief lecture, but I think I ran out of time for about